I have spoken before about how to get your voice heard when you are at a meeting. But have you ever considered when you are leading the meeting that you have a responsibility to make sure that individuals get their voice heard, that your meetings are inclusive? And in today's episode 14 of Unlock Speaking Confidence, that's what I'm going to be talking to you about. My name is Maureen from Soft Skills Success, and today I'm taking a look at how you can create meetings that are more inclusive and that allows people to have their voices, to have their opinions heard. And we're going to take a look at this over a number of steps. First thing that you can do is decide if you're going to send some information out in advance. The advantage of this, that people have that opportunity to read through the document, to put their thoughts together so that they are not caught on the hop in a meeting, that they've got some time to process it and that they might have their opinions ready to bring along to the meeting with them. Disadvantage of that, of course, is that very often with best intentions, we find it difficult to get that time put aside to do that pre-reading work. And it could be just a 2-second glance before going into the meeting to sort of skim it over to see exactly what it's about. There's an interesting approach to this by Jeff Bezos from Amazon, because what he does is deliberately set aside quiet time, silent time at the start of a meeting. So when people arrive into the meeting, they are given the memo, the documents at that stage, and time is allocated for them to read at the start of the meeting in silence. And sometimes that can be up to 30 minutes of time that is spent, where people have that uninterrupted time, read through the document, make their notes, and then be in a position to be able to discuss it afterwards. So have a think about what's going to work best, or test it out to see what works best with your team, with your organization. But either way, it allows people that time to process information in advance so that they're then more likely to be able to contribute to the meeting. Secondly, and this is linked to having that information set in advance, have a think about slides. If you are using slides, what amount of information is on them? Because if information has been sent out in advance, you really don't need text-heavy slides. If there has been a very long document that has been sent out, maybe your slides could be used to just highlight key points, key discussion points, rather than going through everything that's from the document. Because if it's a case that there's slides up there with lots of text and you're reading through, it's a waste of people's time. And I was speaking about wasting people's time in my previous video, so take a look back on that one if you haven't seen it already. The third point that I would suggest is to have your ground rules set in advance. So at the start of the meeting, or when you start leading meetings for the first time, to let people know what your expectations are. And that could be that you expect people to contribute, that you expect people to be able to contribute without being interrupted by others, and your role as chair is to ensure that those interruptions don't take place. That you could be that if somebody has thoughts on a topic afterwards that they didn't bring up at the meeting, that they are welcome to submit them to you afterwards. You decide what the ground rules are for your meeting and enforce them, and make sure that they are enforced. The next point that I would make is about asking for feedback. So that's part of what you have set out in your ground rules, that you're going to be looking for people's opinions and so on. But then when something is being discussed, that you're including people into the meeting. And one of the ways to include them is to just have a note of who's attending. And very discreetly, if somebody makes a point, makes a contribution to the meeting, that you can put a tick beside their name, and it's very easy to see who tends to be contributing most at the meeting, but who isn't getting their voice heard. And allowing them that opportunity by saying, Paul, have you got anything that you would like to add into this? It gives them the opportunity to speak up if they've got something to say. Back to those people who tend to be speaking a lot, and we're familiar with those who can hijack a meeting, particularly if they've got their own topic, their own agenda that they want to bring to it. Be prepared for that in advance. How do you handle those situations? In a way that somebody gets heard, that they're respected, but that the meeting isn't being dominated or hijacked by them. And it could be quite simply by acknowledging their point, saying that's a really good point. It's not on today's agenda. It's something that we will bring up at next week's, and then make sure that it is on next week's. Or you decide what is appropriate in the situation, but think about it in advance so that you're not caught unawares with something like this. You're ready, forewarned, forearmed. A key communication skill is listening. And that is really important when it comes to leading meetings. If it is a case that you are the person who is doing practically all of the talking and all that you're doing is just sharing information, again, back to a point that I made in the previous video, should that really have been a meeting, or was there a more effective way to communicate that? When you are looking for feedback, when you are keeping an eye on what's happening in the room, that you're listening carefully, you're listening to the language that's being used by people speaking, but you're also listening with your eyes as well as your ears, that you're keeping an eye out for body language. That body language could be very simply like somebody who is trying to get included in the meeting, and they're making that known by their body language. Or it could be that somebody is really not agreeing with what's going on, and you can see that reflected in their body language as well. And that can be an opportunity for you to draw them into the discussion. So being aware of all of this, that it's not just you speaking, that you're listening effectively and listening with your eyes as well as your ears. A quick recap on what we're after going through there, how to keep your meetings as inclusive as possible. So first of all, have a think about the information that's going to be distributed at the meeting. What's the most effective way to allow people that time to process it and to come up with their thoughts and opinions on it? Is it sending it out in advance, or is it allowing some time at the start of the meeting to allow people to read it and think through then? Secondly, is to have minimum information on your slides. Thirdly, to have your ground rules set up in advance that people know what to expect. Their participation is expected, it's encouraged, and it will be respected because there won't be interruptions by others and so on. Next is to ask for feedback, to particularly ask people to get engaged if they are that bit quieter in the meeting, to encourage them, to allow them to come in. And at the end of the meeting, maybe to see what went well, what could do better the next time around, and really get effective feedback for what works for people in that meeting so that you can build on it and improve on it in the next meeting. Meeting hijackers, how do you deal with them? Have that planned for in advance. Think about it. And one of your roles then is also that listening, that you're listening to what's being said, to what's not being said, listening with your eyes and your ears. You're keeping an eye out for body language. And that topic of body language, I'm going to be talking about in next week's session. So I do hope that you'll join me then. My name is Maureen from Soft Skills Success, and this has been episode 14 of Unlock Speaking Confidence.